Directors meeting of June 27th, 2022. The year's traveling very quickly. Could we have a roll call, please?
Director Dye.
Here.
Director Clark.
Here.
Director Penrose.
Here.
Director Slater Carter.
Present.
Director Lohman. Not in as yet. Chair Ruddock.
Here. So I think we have a quorum, do we not?
Yes, we do.
Yes.
Welcome back, Jeremy.
Hi to be here.
Good to see you. All right. So we're going to start with public comment. And this is the item where you may address items not on the regular agenda or items that are on the consent agenda. Do we have any hands raised? I don't see any on my screen. Okay, so we will close public comment. And we will move to the consent agenda. Does anybody want to pull any items, 3A, B, or C? Okay, can we have a motion? Matthew?
I put my hand up. We don't have to pull these if I can make these comments and get the changes done. The minutes of the June 13th meeting recorded the consent agenda vote incorrectly. I voted nay. It was 7-1. It's recorded as unanimous. If we could fix that. And on item C, on page 22 of the revenue and expense report, this is just spelling. For some reason, there's a header topic that says differed on items on the outflow and on the inflow. It says differed, and then the next line below it, which is the item itself, it says deferred. So they're close, but they're not the same word. So we could fix that.
Is that on the budget? Sorry, is that on the budget report you're talking, Director Clark?
The revenue and expense report, yes.
Revenue.
Page 22.
Page 22 of the PDF.
Yeah. Well, yes, I guess it is the PDF. The line in blue is different.
Oh, yeah, correct. Yeah. It's a typo.
Yeah.
We'll fix that. And I didn't quite get the minutes which you mentioned. Could you please repeat that for me?
On the consent vote at the June 13th meeting, I voted nay.
The consent agenda. Okay.
Yes.
So if the board were so inclined, they could approve, if there's no further discussion required, you could approve these items on consent subject to the revisions requested by Director Clark.
Sounds good.
I'll make that motion.
And I'll
second it.
Second.
Seconded by Member Penrose. Can I have a roll call, please?
Director Dye. Director Clark. Director Clark.
Oh, aye.
Director Penrose.
Aye.
Director Slater Carter.
Yes.
Director Lohman is still not in. Chair Ruddock.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, motion carries.
Motion carries.
Move to item 4, regular business, authorize the general manager to issue a purchase order to Calcom Systems for the supply and installation of variable frequency drives with necessary accessories for the 5 new small inflow pumps in the amount of $85,884.04.
Okay. Excuse me. Since it's a light agenda, I took the liberty of putting a small PowerPoint to explain the variable frequency drive. So if I may share the screen, please. you able to see my screen?
Yes.
Director Clark, I see your hand raised. Did you want to wait till I
Oh.
finish my presentation and ask a question now?
Okay, yeah. Sorry.
No problem. So this is about variable frequency drives, which we plan on installing on those existing influent pumps, small influent pumps. Now, what is a variable frequency drive? Too basic a question. I'm sure most of you know about it, but I just thought I'll bring it to the public's attention. A variable frequency drive is a type of motor controller that drives an electric motor. It basically varies the frequency and voltage supplied to the electric motor. Now, a lot of times, variable frequency drive is also called as an AC drive, alternating current drive. Now, the frequency or hertz, which we are very familiar with, is directly related to the motor's speed. The higher the frequency, the faster the motor rotates. So what happens is in the case of a pump, the pump speed is proportional to its flow. If you increase the speed, then the flow increases. So it's all related. The frequency increases, the speed of the motor increases, and then the flow increases. In wastewater treatment, pumps need not run at 100% speed all the time. The variable frequency drive allows the pump to run at reduced speed when needed. So which means depending upon the demand, the variable frequency drive can either go to higher flows, can get the pump to run to higher flows or lower flows. Now, how does the VFD work? Now, the VFD has got basically three basic components, which is an input rectifier, a DC bus, and an output inverter. So what happens is, as you all know, the current that we have is AC, which is alternating current. So when it gets into the variable frequency drive, the input rectifier converts it into direct current, into a DC. And then at the middle, which is called a DC bus, the DC bus actually makes sure that the DC coming in gets filtered and gets properly done. I mean, it cuts out all the anomalies and filters it literally, and then brings it to the third stage, which is called an output inverter. And the output inverter again converts the DC back to alternating current, and then it's fed into the motor. So it's basically all this filtering and all that happens in the DC bus. And all these three items are a part of the variable frequency drive. Now, what are the benefits of the variable frequency drive? This basically saves energy because you don't have to run it always at 100% speed. It prolongs the motor and mechanical component life. It basically reduces the need for maintenance because it has the ability to vary the velocity and torque of an electric motor. It can alleviate wear and tear on the motor, as well as machine driven by the motor over a long period of time. Without a VFD, the motor is either 100% on or 100% off. While with the case of a VFD, you can have 100% on, or you can have 80, 75, 60, whatever it is. This eliminates the initial power inrush and mechanical shock of switching the motor from 0 to 100%. Just imagine in the case a sudden demand is required, then if there is no VFD, then it suddenly changes from 0 to 100. It can start off that way. So that can cause damage to the motor and its components. Now, the typical construction, as I've mentioned, the VFD consists of a rectifier, a DC intermediate circuit, and a DC to AC inverter. Now, these can vary in physical sizes from small wall-mounted units to cabinet built. The one at the bottom, which is shown, is the small one, which could fit into a wall, or the large ones are basically the VFDs, which go into cabinets. Now, these are the typical VFD mountings. A wall-mounted VFD, as shown on the left, these are a bunch of VFDs, which are on the left side, which I've shown. And then you have a cabinet-mounted VFDs. You see these three VFDs, which are in the cabinet, which are all the other accessories which fit into the cabinet. This is how typically the VFDs are installed. And just to let you guys know, we have about 35 VFDs all over at the wastewater treatment plant at various locations, influent, effluent, digester, building, various places. And of them, almost 32 of them are one make, which is ABB make. And the balance were probably Allen Bradley, which has been probably procured way back in the past. Now to the right side of the picture, what is shown is the way the existing VFDs are at SAM. You see these 5 cabinets or existing cabinets. You see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. These, although there are 5 of them, we have only 3 VFDs for the 5 pumps. And these are all for the small influent pumps we're talking of. Of the 3 VFDs that are for the small influent pumps, we have 1 which has stopped working. Number 3 is stopped working. Number 2 is getting close to, I think, dying. And number 1 seems to be working fine. Number 4 and 5 are not on VFDs at all. So each of these, it is necessary that each of these small influent pumps should be equipped with a new FD. That is a proposal that has been brought to the board today. Now, the new proposal, what is being presented to you, will have a bypass system to allow the motors to run across the line at 100% speed. In case the VFDs need maintenance, then we have a bypass system which allows the motors to run across the line. The existing cabinets will be demolished because these VFDs, which are right now in the existing cabinets, are all old models, so they are pretty huge. Now, when we procure new VFDs, these are small VFDs, smaller in size, and therefore will not be able to fit into the existing cabinets. So that's it. That's all I wanted to share with you. I can get back to the screen, and if anybody has questions, then we can I can bring it back again. Oops, sorry.
Any questions for Keishan? Matthew?
First, I'd like to make a comment, which is that these PowerPoints, which are clearly prepared ahead of time, I think should be subject to the Brown Act, and they should be noted in the agenda, and they should be available to the public and to the board before the meeting. Perhaps our counsel can give us an opinion on that. If he needs to research it, I'll be happy.
I can speak to it. No research needed. But yeah, happy to speak to that, Director Clark. The rule in the Brown Act for materials, so your agenda obviously has to be posted within a certain amount of time, whether it's a special meeting or regular meeting. For materials that are going to be discussed during the meeting, it has to be made available to the public at the same time it's made available to a majority of the board. And so to the extent that it's made available to the board right now at the same time as the public, it's not a Brown Act issue, but there could be a question as to whether the board wants the PowerPoint sooner. That's not really a legal issue so much as just a management board direction kind of an issue.
Well, may I express my opinion? I would always like to have the PowerPoints ahead of time.
I would agree with that. Director Dye.
Thank you. That was interesting. Is this budget already? Is this part of the infrastructure budget or operations? How does this fit into our budget? Thanks.
I understand your question, Director Dye. This is a part of the existing infrastructure budget. It's a part of the electricals for small influent pumps. It's a part of that budget. Was that your question, Director Dye? Okay. You're not very, the audio is not very clear. So I couldn't hear it, sorry.
Director Clark, you still have your hand up. Do you have another comment or question?
Yes, I do. This is all about the small pumps. And as noted in the staff report, the board okayed buying 5 new pumps just in February. And now variable frequency drives are being asked for all 5 drives. And one, I'm wondering why they weren't purchased and authorized back in February when the board got this item previously to include VFDs. And I point out that it says the pumps are being manufactured and they'll probably be shipped in July or August. July is next week. are we going to buy the VFDs for pumps 4 and 5 and then replace them in maybe less than a month?
Any more questions? Can I answer your question?
No more questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Director Clark. The reason it was not brought in February was because these are two separate budget items. We have separate budget for pumps and separate budget for electricals for the pumps. And the pumps have a long lead time to 6 to 8 months. And that's why we normally finalize the pump first. And as the pump submittals get approved, then we get to know all the electrical specifications and all the requirements. And then we go ahead and size the electrical accessories and VFDs and all that stuff. So these VFDs have less lead time, about 4 to 6 weeks compared to 6 to 8 months for the pump. And therefore, we've timed it in such a way that it's still within the budget and still within the budget financial year, and still we'll have it ready when the pumps come in and get installed.
So are the VFDs going to be put on the existing pumps 4 and 5, and then they'll be replaced when the new pumps come in, maybe a month or less?
No, they would be installed at the same time as the new pumps.
Okay, thanks. That clarifies it. I still don't know why this was a known need, why it wasn't just included with the pumps themselves back in February.
I'm sorry if you're not convinced, Director Clark. What I'm trying to tell you is maybe I didn't express it clearly. The pumps specifications get finalized only after the submittals are given by the contractor, by the vendor. And the submittals are given by the vendor only after we place an order on the vendor. So the process is we place a PO on the vendor for the pumps. Then the pump characteristics, all the details are then given to us for approval. And once we approve, then the clock starts for them to start manufacturing the pumps. At that point of time, it is very clear to us the various electrical requirements and all other dimensions and everything else required for the pumps. So based on that, we then size the electrical accessories and then find out what is it that we need, what sort of electrical accessories required and how much, because we would already finalize the pump. And the pumps are long lead item, like I told you, 6 to 8 months, while the VFDs are just about 4 to 6 weeks. So that's why, and plus these are two separate budget items in the infrastructure budget. And therefore, it's not necessary that we should do everything at once or at one shot.
So are you saying that all these pumps and the VFDs have to be custom made and they're not industry standard items?
No, I'm not saying that, but the submittals need to be given because each pump has a characteristics. We have to make sure that the flow and the pressure and the other requirements are to our basic needs. So that's why the submittals are important. It's not like off the shelf. We can't just go and pick up whatever it is and then buy it. These are custom built because these pumps are custom built because they don't keep it on the shelf, ready for anybody to pick it up. They are built to one's needs, and it takes 6 to 8 months to build a pump. They can't keep it ready waiting for somebody to just come and pick it up.
Okay, thanks.
Welcome.
You know, it might have been helpful at the time we had the staff report, you know, for the equipment in February that mention would be made that, and by the way, there's a separate budget item that's related that will be determined, you know, at a future date because of this particular process. So it's just good when we're approving a project in a budget item to also understand if they're related budget items and, you know, what their relationship is and what the timeline is. So it's mainly just informational, but it would help to include that information, you know, at the beginning, I think. That's all I'm saying. Okay, any other questions? Kishan.
Yeah, I have a request which was just decided that the PowerPoint should be attached to the agenda when the agenda is sent out. Now the agendas are required, agenda and staff report are required to be sent out on Wednesday of every, you know, prior to the board packet. That's a little too soon compared to even legal requirements where it's 72 hours before the agenda is posted. Now, if the agenda and the PowerPoint has to be ready on or before Wednesday, that's going to be very tough for the staff to be prepared for it. So if we may request the PowerPoint could possibly be sent out to the directors and posted on the public on a different day other than Wednesday, maybe on a Friday, that would help. Because it's the meetings are so quick. Every other Monday is every other Monday is a board meeting. By the time we finish and do that, we need to start working on the next thing. So it might discourage us to bring it back to the board at a quicker date. We might just have to push it to 2 weeks away or 4 weeks away. So it's a request is maybe we need to modify the agenda and post the PowerPoint at different points of time.
So let me tell you how the City County Association of Governments handles this. So they have quite large agendas, and the agendas go out usually like on Thursday or Friday before the following Thursday meeting. But the PowerPoint presentations or any addendum follow, and they're usually posted, though, still ahead of the meeting date, but they might be posted on, a couple days later or the Monday before the Thursday meeting. And then they just add links to the PowerPoints or the addenda, on the agenda page. So you'll go to the agenda, it'll have the agenda, and it'll say additional items for the upcoming meeting. And you can click on the individual items and pull up presentations and things like that. So you just add links to these things as they're available. And then, just make every effort to give the board, some time in the public to see them ahead of the meeting as opposed to presenting them at the meeting.
That sounds like what Keishan was suggesting.
Yeah.
Yes, that's what I was suggesting, saying that we send out the packet, try and send out the packet on Wednesday, and then follow it up later on with the PowerPoint presentation, maybe Friday or whatever.
Yeah, you just add links to the website.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
Any other comments or questions? The record should note that Director Lohman joined about 10 minutes ago.
Massive problems.
Okay, sorry about that. Okay, we're moving. Oh, so we need to have a motion and a second on this item.
So moved.
I'll second. Could we have a roll call, please?
Director Dyke,
Yes.
Director Lohman,
Yes.
Director Clark,
Aye.
Director Penrose,
Aye.
Director Slater-Carter,
Yes.
Chair Radek.
Yes.
Thank you.
Moving on to the general manager's report.
The detailed report is there in the packet. If there are any questions, fine. The staff is here to answer. Otherwise, I'd like to just show a small link to our Sentry system, which I talked about earlier, but I just want to show you the live data. We made some improvements. I just thought I could share it with everyone. But first, if there are any questions on the staff report, otherwise I can jump onto that. I see that Director Clark has a question.
Director Clark?
There, on page 48 of the PDF, it says that there was a small IPF leak, and I put my questions as where did they puddle on the surface? And then when I got down to the day-by-day summaries on page 50, it mentions an IPS leak that was worked on the 9th of May that required the replacement of a 4-foot section of the force main. Are those the same leak, or were there two leaks?
That's the same leak, Director Clark.
Okay. And the small puddling required 4 feet of the force main to be replaced?
Correct. That's the same thing. If you recall, I believe I brought it to the attention of the board probably around the same time. I had mentioned about the leak and we had discussed about it. That's the same thing. We haven't had any other leak after that.
do we have any data on why it leaked and at that location?
We do have the findings of the leak saying that it was basically there was a pinhole of the pipe, but other than that, we are unable to find out more details. We've sent out the pipe for some investigation. I'm yet to hear back from the lab.
Yeah, it's also said the farmer whose property it goes probably right in front of noticed the leak too. So it was seen on the surface, right?
Correct. It was seen on the surface, but it was category 3, so there's not much damage.
Thank you.
Can I share my screen, please?
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah, so we had mentioned it a couple of meetings earlier that we have installed these 2 probes at the influent and the primary effluent. And these have now been calibrated. And we find that the values which the sensor shows real-time values, we've also put it up on the SCADA. And these pretty much match with the lab values that we actually measure. So staff is able to make best use of it. They're able to check out and make any process changes if required. Like, for example, if you take this, I don't know if you're able to see it. This is exactly at this time. At 7 o'clock, it tells you that the COD, the y-axis is actually COD, and the x-axis is the time. So the y-axis shows you 1190. And as you take it further, then it shows you, sorry. I think it's, yeah. See this part of it. So this shows you on a real-time basis what the COD values are. And this is very useful for us, for the staff. It also triggers off alarms. We have given certain set points. And when the COD reaches a particular set point, it sends you an email. And this is very useful for the staff, and we're excited about the use of this. It gives you both the primary effluent as well as the influent. And last time when I shared this screen and shown it to the board a couple of months back, we hadn't calibrated it. The y-axis was still showing the carbon consumption rate. And at that point of time, the values for the effluent were actually higher than influent. The primary effluent was higher than the influent, which is not the case. While right now it's been calibrated, and these values are the correct values where it shows that the influent values are higher than the primary effluent values. I just wanted to share this, and this is available real time for the staff to improve on their processes. Thank you.
Any questions for staff on that process?
I see Director Dye has a question.
Barbara?
So what are the yellow and pink bands?
Yeah, the yellow ones is when actually it's an alarm notification thing. It gives you signals saying that we can set that at any point we want. If we think the COD levels are going to be, if it's high when it reaches 1200, then we can set the yellow line there. So then it sends an alarm to us. It sends an email to us, and then the red one is when it becomes critical, very critical.
All right, well, it looks as if the influent was relatively low, and immediately after that happened, the effluent went high. So
yeah, this is the primary effluent. So it is all, what is important for us is actually for the process is the primary effluent. That's where it, before it gets into the mixed liquor, into the aeration basin, we make sure that these values are within limits.
But you just said that's in the problem area, and yet there's nothing in the influent that would correlate to these higher readings. I'm just
Correct.
charged.
Yeah, because both have got different levels of acceptance. I mean, maximum could be different for both of them.
But still, you would think that there would be a correlation. Is there a big time lag between influent levels and effluent levels that we're not seeing?
Yes, there is a time lag because the sensor, by the time it touches the influent, it senses the influent, and by the time the sewer actually comes to the primary effluent, goes through various stages, go through the grid chamber, and then comes to the primary effluent, it's going to take a little bit of time. There is a little bit of a time lag.
So then showing these two together, these two are completely unrelated in terms of time.
Yeah, that is why this was just to show it to the screen. Otherwise, we check only this and we check only influent or primary effluent, whatever is important for us.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, we can move on to the attorney's report.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. The only thing I was just going to share briefly is, and this is probably a little more relevant in the water context and the wastewater context, but EPA is really upping the ante in their efforts to regulate PFAS, PFAS, and some of you guys have probably heard about that in other areas. And it's a big deal in water, but it's becoming a bigger issue in wastewater as well. But last week, the EPA released advisories recommending that water providers not provide water, or at least limit water provision of containing PFOA and PFOS. Those are the big kind of the bad perfluorinated that people worry about. But in parts per quadrillion, which is, I don't even know how you measure that. So it's extremely low. Made California's standards, which were the toughest in the country, seem quite permissive by. I'm not sure how you measure that. It's basically non-detect. So, and then they're also regulating. So those are the, I believe, the short chain perfluorinateds. But they're also regulating a couple of next generation perfluorinateds as well. So. It's likely we're going to start seeing more regulations come up with, even though SAM has an ocean discharge, you're likely to see more monitoring requirements and more regulatory requirements associated with PFAS as EPA at the federal level and then the state imposes more and more requirements. So it's just something to watch. And also, particularly on the water side, it's going to have a more immediate impact as both the state and the federal government develop maximum contaminant levels for these different perfluorinated compounds. That's it.
Which is to say costs are going up.
Yeah.
Just to make that clearer for the public, when we have to ask for more money, it's not because we made this decision. We were told to do it.
Everything will get more expensive.
That's a universal.
Greg, you're muted.
Yeah, I wanted to ask Jeremy, the sewer authorities and the water authorities don't put PFAS in there. It comes from their use in products and manufacture. And a stitch in time saves 9, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And why the heck isn't there pressure on stopping the use of these chemicals? Or is there? Can you describe the impetus to clean these things up at the source instead of asking ratepayers and sewer authorities to do the virtually impossible?
Good questions. So the source of PFAS to wastewater plants is actually pretty complicated. It's not just what you'd think of as typical contamination sources. It's actually people's bodies, because we all have PFAS inside of us, which is kind of freaky to think about. But that's what winds up in wastewater plants, because people have PFAS. And just because there's so much in the environment, there's a lot there. So going to the source is difficult because the source is very diffused. Going after, and that's not true everywhere, but in a lot of wastewater plants, that is the case. There also can be, like, for example, in the Santa Ana River, there are specific areas that have identified where, for example, you had a prior 3M. 3M is one of the big producers of PFAS. And so they had a facility that's believed to have been a source of potential contamination. Airports have been linked. One of the major sources of PFAS is firefighting foam. And so that when people have done, or when fire departments and airports have done exercises and to do drills for what, like putting out or addressing a plane crash would do, you have those kind of chemical residuals that wind up in the groundwater. That doesn't typically wind up in the wastewater plant. The wastewater plant, in a lot of cases, like I said, it's coming from when people go to the bathroom, they have PFAS inside them. And when you're talking about such microscopic levels, you're going to have.
Jeremy, I know you are not to blame or responsible for what you're saying, but the PFAS gets into people because it's either on the Teflon or the fire retardant, or see what I'm saying? So I would really love some clues on how we could pressure upstream the people who employ these chemicals in manufacturing and construction of products. Just, when you get a minute.
Yeah, I mean, sure. I mean, but there's litigation against the main DuPont and 3M are the main manufacturers. So there's already part of that going on. But yeah, I can give some additional thought to things that could be done, and we can talk about that.
Yeah, the legislature has been trying to tackle source control for plastics, for a couple of decades, and not made a lot of progress, So it's got to be done, but it's a long fight. You got to play the long game on that one. Matthew.
PFAS have been a concern for quite a number of years now, and there are a lot of people working on it. I read last week that for the first time, PFAS had been detected in mother's milk. So babies are getting it directly. And as Council just said, we all have it in the form both. Well, what I read was they were nanoparticles. Are these actual single molecules that it sounds like they'd be impossible to get out of the wastewater stream, or are they particles?
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that. That's really kind of more of a chemistry question, but
yeah, it's really technical.
Yeah, I mean, treatment, the way you treat it, I mean, there's a couple of different ways you can use. You can do reverse osmosis, you can do ion exchange, you can do GAC, granular activated carbon. So there's different proven technologies. It's just it adds additional costs, and at a wastewater plant, it's particularly expensive because you have to add it on to the additional processes. The biggest challenge, I think, for agencies like SAM is going to be sludge, because it gets concentrated there. And for those agencies that do a reverse osmosis where you do RO, again, you can have your PFAS concentrated there too. So those are all going to be challenges in the future that we're going to have to think about how to address.
I think you'd need awfully tiny membranes, really fine resolution membranes to capture, nanoparticles like that.
Yeah.
Different technology. Anybody else? All right, director's reports. I don't see any hands raised. Do we have any topics for future board consideration? Okay. Do we have any items on closed session?
I don't have a need for a closed session tonight unless Kishan does.
Kishan, do you have any items on closed session?
No, I don't have any. Chair.
Well, then we can adjourn the meeting.
Yay.
Well, let's.
Good night, everyone.
Good night,
Well,
everyone.
everyone have a great week. And this was a good meeting. Thank you very much.